Uh, when I spotlight myself, it just makes it so that only I'm recorded, but it's still like grid view for everybody, or for me at least. I just moved it back. Um, yeah. So the comment you just made is a psychedelic experience, just like the quote awaken state. What it is that reality, experience, consciousness. I define these all as the same thing. It just appears differently depending on the state. So the psychedelic state could have uh, certain bodily energetics that would be arising that are not normally there. Your mental pictures are very vivid. You could have the sense that you are every single thing that you think, but fundamentally, one second. Um, so the experiential characteristics can be different. So in a psychedelic state, there could be tons of bliss and unity consciousness and whatever. Um, but it's no different than the difference between a dream and the waking state. Mind, reality, experience appears as the dreamscape, the same way that it appears as this room, the same way that it appears as the psychedelic state. It's just that they're all shifting conditions or specific aspects of the field are different, but it's still the field. So that's why it's the same. That's why it's not different. Here in this state, with this room like this, uh, the main characteristics of this are seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, thinking, experiences appearing as that. If I close my eyes and I enter a jhana or a very deep state of meditation, those experiential characteristics will disappear. So there won't be hearing, there won't be seeing, there won't be feeling, there won't be thinking. The mind could enter a kind of just very, very deep stillness where the sense of the body is not perceivable. That's still within experience. It's just that now the configuration is different. In dreamless sleep, for example, if you've ever been aware as the dreamscape dissolves, when the dreamscape dissolves, the mind appears as uh, just this opaque voidness, light, and in that there's no capacity to shift attention, there's no capacity to give rise to an intention, there's no recollection, there's no thinking, there's no mental pictures, there's no self-reflective consciousness. So there's no sense of a you that's there, right? That's just the field configured that way. This is one of the big things that big lessons that Peter taught me, or that I got from Peter directly, because I had this awakening or this collapse of duality, and I talked with Peter and I said, hey, yeah, so radiant presence, I get it, totally get it, I understand everything that you're talking about, but I still have this like ultimate state thing that's hanging over my head from when I had a near death experience. My mind and body and world just vanished into this ocean of 10 billion suns. It's the only way I could describe it. It was like becoming light, you know, and eternity and infinity. It was forever. And so, of course, that was not something that was accessible to me after the fact. So when I talked with Peter, I asked him, hey, should I be able to cross my legs and enter that? And he said, was it or was it not an experience? It's like, yeah, of course it was an experience. I mean, if it was an experience, I wouldn't have remembered it. Was it or was it not apart from consciousness? Of course, not apart. How could it be? And he said, right. Your mind is the Dharmakaya. Or your mind is the body of enlightenment. In the same way that your mind appeared as that ocean of 10 billion suns, infinity and eternity, your mind is appearing as this room. It has no findable ultimate nature, yet it appears as everything. And the next thing he said, part of what led up to the initial uh, recognition of consciousness, in my case, I think I was 26 or something at the time. So it was after 7 years of practicing a lot of meditation and really just being lost and also growing up. And part of my initial training in Buddhism and in Taoism, uh, one of my early teachers was like a Buddhist Taoist type person. Part of the early training was celibacy. So like for 1 year, no porn, no masturbation, no sex. And it did lead to some profound developments. But so that's what happened. That's what my life was like leading up to it. And so I asked Peter, hey, so to deepen the continuity of my noticing and to make my samadhi stronger, should I go back to this whole celibacy thing and discipline in that regard? And he just said, what you do as a person has absolutely no relationship with this state. And they just didn't say anything after that. So whatever practice that you do, whether you can enter these states or that states, psychedelics that you take, whatever, they don't they don't increase reality and they don't decrease reality. No matter how much meditation you do, you don't get more reality. You don't get more experience. You don't get more mind. You never get more mind or less mind. You never get more reality or less reality. Nothing that you do adds to or takes away from the presence of experience. So really sadhana, spiritual practice, uh, whatever it is that we're doing, what is clarified or what changes is the degree of noticing and our understanding that is within the experiential field, that is within reality. Our conceptual understanding of what's going on can change. The degree of our noticing can change. The continuity of our awareness can change. That can be more, that can be less, but experience itself is continuous, uninterruptedly continuous. So uh, the point is to just notice what is fundamentally the case, which is this. We can call this. We can call it happening. We can call it experience. We could call it mind. We could call it reality. We could call it consciousness. We could call it banana. it's it's just everything. The presence of what is. And nothing that happens or doesn't happen affects the presence of what is. Let's say you're having a good dream. Let's say you're having the best dream you've ever had. The presence of experience in the best dream you've ever had is the same as the presence of experience in the worst dream you've ever had, in the most terrible points of your life, and in the most incredible points in your life. The presence of experience was the same. In the craziest psychedelic, non local, omnipresent deity consciousness that you've experienced, the presence of experience was also the case the same way that it is right now. So, this is the whole point with when people say it's fundamentally the same or it's all equal, it's in this regard. In a dream, it doesn't matter what's occurring, it's still a dream. In experience, irrespective of what's occurring, it's fundamentally still reality, still experience. So there's this whole thing with the absolute and the relative, right? And there's this I don't know, kind of dance navigation thing that we have to do or that we feel that has to be done between the absolute perspective of no self or non-duality and like the relative conditions of our life, work, family, relationships, the physical body, career, whatever. So the issue is that we have this idea that absolute reality is spirituality or is certain states, and then relative reality is all of this and like our mundane stuff. It's not that there's two realities. It's not that there's two fields of experience. That's not the case, right? What we're defining as absolute reality and what we're defining as relative reality are both reality. They're both experience. It's just that we define one as absolute and we define the other as relative. We define our spiritual life as this core unassailable thing, and we define relative conditions as, changing, not particularly important, depending on who you are as a practitioner or just who you are as a person. We have these ideas, we create these designations about what's more important, what's less important, what's more valuable, what's less valuable, what's absolute, what's relative. It's not that there's two realities. It's that there's two views. There's the absolute view and there's the relative view. But it's the same reality. It's not that it's not that relative reality is over here and absolute reality is over here. No. The relative is the absolute. There are no two realities. So the relative conditions, what we're calling relative conditions, I have to go to work tomorrow, or I need to go pick up my son, or my grandma's sick and I need to take her to the hospital. Um, one second. Okay. It's not that the relative conditions, whatever area it is of our lives that we're calling relative, that's not apart from experience. That's not apart from consciousness. It literally is the field appearing as that thing, that given circumstance, that given uh, problem, affliction, whatever it is that we're designating to be relative, literally is the absolute. It literally is the field configured as that. So there is no relative. It's all just experience. It's all just reality. It's all just consciousness, whatever we want to call it. So there's an absolute and there's a relative view, and that means, for example, in the Buddhist teachings and in the Hindu teachings, right? There's the teachings that are they're from the perspective of no self, no persons, no world, no form. You'll hear statements like nothing ever happened and none of this is here. That's absolute understanding, right? All of this is Mahamudra. All of this is Buddha nature. There's no such thing as a being that can actually be found. What we call a being is a designation for a nexus of conditions. That's what a being is. A intention, you put together intention, volition, memory, perception, cognition, feeling. With a physical body, you have a being. That's what a being is. No physical body, you still have those presents. That's a formless being, and those exist. So So
Excuse me, what did you say? A nexus of what?
a
Was it
nex a nexus of conditions.
conditions? Okay.
Yeah. So this is the from the perspective of emptiness, right? The Heart Sutra. Emptiness is form, form itself is emptiness. It's the same thing as mind is experience, experience is mind. Emptiness is form, form is emptiness. Likewise, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, which in Buddhism is defined as the five sense consciousnesses and thought. Likewise, are empty. So it's saying all of this is actually pure experience, emptiness, consciousness, appearing configured as these particular things we're calling sensation, perception, mental formations, sense consciousness. So this is the absolute. The relative view, for example, is that that same body of teachings also has teachings on how to improve your conditions. Like if you're sick in Buddhism, they'll tell you, okay, now that you're sick, you have some previous karma that has arisen. If you want to do something about that, you release fish, you release buffalo. So you buy fish and you buy buffalo that were going to be killed, and you release them into the wild. And this is supposed to offset the past karma from your other incarnations that have now come to fruition and have resulted in your sickness. Past karma meaning in previous lives you hurt, maimed, or took life of physical beings. So like echoes that reaches into an incarnation that is in the future. So in the absolute view, you're like, well, how does that make sense? The absolute view says there's no such thing as a being. There's no such thing as a being ultimately, but there's still nexuses of conditions that, under the spell of ignorance, conceive themselves to be a being. And based on that conception, give rise to these karmic formations, give rise to these intentions that will have their subsequent results in the future. That's really what that is referring to. It's like, yes, there is ultimately no such thing as a being or a self, but that's from the perspective of liberation. That's from actually viscerally being free from that ignorance, from that misconception. If you're not free from that misconception, what will happen as a result? You'll have a sense of self and you'll generate intentions that attempt to protect this sense of self, to preserve this sense of self, to perpetuate this sense of self. And it's those intentions that will fuel uh, further rebirth in Buddhism. Generally, I think Hinduism has the same view on this. So, by realization of the absolute, the realization that there's actually no being, there's no self, there's no this, there's no that, they're just those are all just designations for reality, for experience. When this becomes directly cognized, when this becomes the baseline mode of operation, when it becomes a direct insight and realization, the identification with the personality structure, the identification with the narrative, thinking this, thinking that, the fuel for those intentions and the fuel for that rumination and that fixation in regards to ourselves ends, begins to end. For some people, Ramana Maharshi, one swoop, done, no self, it's over. But for, I'd say, most people, there's a gradual dispelling, gradual ceasing. Awakening is really just cessation, cessation of clinging, cessation of craving, cessation of misperception, cessation of greed, hatred, anger, delusion, cessation of self. Awakening is just death before death, so that life within life can truly be recognized and realized. Yeah. Any questions? Yes. Yes, Maggie.
So, not having been here very long, and you're saying, and this seems like rather obvious, but basically in the traditions that you are most familiar with, they're saying that these meditative practices are the key, that they can lead you to that. I've been looking at a book. It's called Seeing That Frees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and so basically he's saying that what's the it's an impermanence, no self, and then this is like,
Suffering. That's the other
well,
one.
and he's saying this one is really the linchpin. Like when you pull this pin out, it just, so many things collapse because not theoretically, you just see it so differently. I think you said before that you just, when you had that experience, it just seemed like you, what I thought you said was there were just so many things I just couldn't take them seriously anymore. I mean, you have to live
Yeah.
it. It's the difference in this dream is when you wake up, the dream doesn't disappear like the morning one. It's like, oh, it's over. But it's like and that's what this guy is saying too. He goes, it may sound insignificant, but I can hear that it's like, oh no, that would really be different to approach, to just be living with that. He gives an analogy where he talks about if you see a tiger and you're very afraid, but then you discover that it's a hologram.
Right.
And it's like, oh, of course, we have bodies that can hurt and all that, but basically he was saying can you just see that there's a huge advantage to discovering that it's a hologram? And you can still, he goes, well, you could experience the fear and you could go through that, and that I think that is useful along the path. But basically he was saying, wouldn't it be better just to find out it's a hologram? So I'm very attracted to that, and that's what these practices are meant to help foster.
Yeah. It's not that the practices or any special state
Right.
necessarily produces this, um doesn't produce experience, right? It doesn't produce reality, but the practices and noticing, for example, or continuing in awareness, um, it'll lead to, or it will open a recognition that wasn't there previously.
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, before I was 26, there was no recognition of consciousness at all. Like no recognition of the inherently awakeness of consciousness. That was not on the map. And I meditated by this time. There's actually a person in here who knows me from way back then. I meditated like 5,000 hours or something, leading before I turned 26, because I did a lot of long retreats. So I suffered a lot. And even with all that meditation, there was still no recognition. It was pointed out, Namkhai Norbu pointed it out to me when I was 20, still didn't get it. And then it took 7 years, and then finally that dawn happened where the recognition occurs, and then after the fact, really it's, even if you forget it or you're distracted from it, or you conceive it to be the self with a capital S, or you conceive it to be a nothingness, whatever it is, fundamentally there's now been a recognition of awareness, and that is very that changes the life of the practitioner completely. So that's why in Dzogchen, Zen, and Mahamudra, they begin with this, right? You do Nundro, or you do your preliminary practices with your prostrations and all of your supplications and all of this. And the master or the teacher just fundamentally gets you to recognize awareness. So in Zen with the Huatuo, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, the koans, where who is dragging this body around, or what is dragging this body around, what is hearing this sound. It's just to get the attention and noticing directed inward so that that recognition can occur. And once that recognition occurs, um, it's defined as uh, discovering or awakening to one's nature, which is distinguished from realizing one's nature. Because although the recognition of awareness has occurred, there's still a progression into the realization of the nature of awareness. Initially, it's conceived to be like this silent watcher thing, and later that particular, at least in my case, that particular idea or that particular experience of it uh, vanishes. Anyone else? Thank you, Maggie.
Hi, I don't know if I'm supposed to raise my hand, but I can't seem to find it on my phone Zoom.
That's
And
okay.
I
We can hear you.
okay, no one else was going. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Hi. So I don't know if I'm going off topic a little, and I know some of the teachers like to say that these things don't matter and such, but I'm just curious. So my third eye has started opening up. So I've already gone through all of the shifts and everything, but I'm still purging a little from my root chakra, and then now it's moving to my third eye chakra. And it's starting to open up where I'm having visions and stuff. I mean, the first one just completely scared me. Like I didn't sleep all night. And then now I'm just kind of curious. Like I'm kind of where you were saying like the relative is the absolute. I'm kind of just like I'm just want to go back into the human story and enjoy it and kind of immerse myself in the messiness of human life. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life being like, oh, there's no self here. you know?
Mm.
So I guess part of me just enjoys it. I don't, but yeah, I've had non-duality teachers be like, oh, so you think you're special because you're having these visions? I'm like, no, I don't think I'm special. I'm curious because I've heard you talk about third eye experiences and out of body experiences and stuff.
Yep.
And I was just curious kind of what, if anything, you drew from that. And I don't know. I know there's no meaning in kind of the grand absolute sense, but
There could be.
is there any
There
meaning in a smaller scale, of just your personal life or your relative life? I guess.
there could be an ultimate meaning. I mean, we don't know that. There could be an ultimate purpose.
Yeah, but nothing that I'm going to try to figure out through my
Yeah.
visions, I guess is what I'm saying. So far, they seem kind of nonsensical.
Right. Right. Well, part of my I still have out of body experiences, and different experience different states of consciousness and all that. So that hasn't stopped. But what's uh the main takeaway, at least for me, was to really uh like I had to go through all of these OBEs, or like alternate consciousness states and planes of consciousness myself, because I really had a sense that at some point, like, there is some ultimate level that is somehow outside experience. And what I found is that is not the case. There may be, it's possible, right? But I have not found that any level of samadhi, any level of consciousness, any state, no matter how profound it was, and I mean, there's been very profound ones. Um, yeah, not fundamentally apart from experience or consciousness at all. So it's not like I don't disregard the powers, right? So if you feel drawn to use that in a certain way, I don't see it as any different than like being an artist. Like
Hmm.
what's wrong with being an artist? So The thing is, with the powers or with whatever, um, this sort of thing is like there can be identification, but of course there's identification with anything.
Yeah.
You could be identified as a doctor. You could be identified. You can take yourself as a lawyer very seriously. So it's not the thing itself that is the issue. It's the mental formation. It's the clinging that the mind does to that object or to
Yeah.
that particular event.
Yeah. So
So
that disclaimer aside, so let's just assume I'm not gonna, really identify with my vision. Just curious, like, so what have your experiences kind of, I don't know, do you have any stories to share or anything meaningful or like, or is that personal?
yeah, I mean, one of the things that was discovered or that was experienced, and this was not something that I'd ever really heard about, was there really is this thing called destiny.
Hmm.
Yeah, there actually is a thing called destiny. So in a deep phase of meditation, the mind receded into this particular level of consciousness that is outside of time as we experience it here. And I talk about this a lot in a particular series on my YouTube channel called Higher Self Yoga, where it was experienced that, like, the same way that I have dreams every night and those dream characters are totally unaware that I'm sleeping in a bed. No, they have no recognition of that except if I'm lucid. But generally speaking, the dreams are not aware. Dream me is not aware that Ryan's in a bed. Likewise, I found that there was this vast intelligence that is dreaming me, or the individuated consciousness that was identified as Ryan, and that this Ryan is one room, one incarnation of hundreds of thousands. So this is the whole like Brahman type consciousness thing.
Yeah.
I consider it just another level or another configuration of reality, but it was still very visceral. It really changed the way that I saw things. And I don't know if that's the case for everybody, right? I can only
Yeah.
vouch for what I've directly come to know, but that is something that not only once did that particular reality become accessible, but many, 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 many times. So
Oh, that's cool. Okay. All right. I guess I'll check out those videos. I don't think I've seen them yet. I just saw your interview that you did with Angela.
yeah, 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 yeah.
No, that sounds really cool. So that was the meditation experience or a psychedelic experience or just kind
No,
of hanging out?
no, it was through I'll explain to anyone here because I've been getting more questions about this recently. One of the things some people have been saying is it's very unusual that you're like a non-dual person, but then you have all this weird,
Yeah.
alternate reality stuff. So what happened was I've had out of body experiences ever since I was 18. So I trained myself in how to do lucid dreaming and go out of body, quote out of body, after reading Carlos Castaneda, actually, Teachings of Don Juan. I was
Mhm.
really just blown away by that book. And so I started doing the reality checks. Within a couple weeks, I had a lucid dream, and then looked into books on the out of body experience or astral projection. So I trained myself like every night. I would wake up after 5 hours, and I would do an attempt to phase my consciousness outside my physical body. And after 3 months, there was finally success. So it took a very long time for me. And because of that initial like momentum in that whole endeavor, it really just made that part of my unfolding in time, uh for the rest. I mean, even up to now, just happens on its own. So after 10 years of OBEs, and I've experienced different beings or different types of realities and all of that. That wasn't particularly important. What became important was at one point I had a dream where uh I was in this like parking garage and this like little demon was running at me. And mind you, I'm not lucid here, okay? The little demon's running at me, and I do the Buddhist thing, which is like radiating loving kindness. It rips my throat out, and I become deceased in the dream. And then the dream rewinds, and so does my memory. My memory was rewinded. So now the thing's running at me again. I try to fight it. That doesn't work. It defeats me. Rips my throat out. Rewinds for the third time. And mind you, every time it rewinds, I don't know it's being rewinded. So then this thing's running at me, and I just open my mouth and I eat it. I just swallow the guy. And as soon as I swallow him, the whole parking garage becomes illuminated, like filled with light. My lucidity turns on. I remember that I was rewound 3 times. This screen appears, and the screen says this, something along the lines of this. The voice of childhood, the voice that we all heard in our minds as kids that told us we could do great things or that we could change the world, that voice of hope is never lost. It is only drowned by the voices of the world, by the opinions of other people. And then I woke up from that, and my first thought was, I've encountered all kinds of beings in these states, right? And psychedelics was not part of my unfolding. It was in the beginning, like 15, 16, 17, and then I dropped it after that when I got more into Buddhist meditation. So it wasn't part of these later events. But still, with the OBs, I encountered all kinds of stuff, and never, ever, ever had I had an experience where my memory itself was rewinded. Ever. So the first thing I thought was, what on God's earth was able to rewind my memory and consciousness? There's no way. How is that possible? So then I began to wonder what was it that was speaking to me in the dream? And of course, people say, oh, it's guidance, it's higher self, it's God. These are all insufficient answers for me. I don't care what people call it, you know? I want to know what it is. It's like, oh, just like it's just the voice of God. And like, what does that mean? So so I began to wonder, like, what is this guiding hand in the out of body experience? When you have an intention to go from one place to another, or to meet a particular being, there's literally a force that moves you to that reality. What is that? So I began to ask this, and what I found shocked me, like literally to the core. Shocked me. So there was this. I finally like reversed the direction of the OBE. For 10 years, the OBE was always like out, 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 and then to sense where this voice was coming from, or where this guiding intelligence was coming from, I reversed the direction. So I inverted consciousness in itself, and I appeared in a kind of inner structure, and that's where past life knowledge was accessible. So, for example, in Buddhism, in the Buddhist texts, will always say he or she attained the recollection of their former existences. They were able to see 5,000 existences back, 50,000 existences back, 500,000 existences back, but they never describe the experiential characteristics of that vision or of that knowledge. Is it something that happens in mental pictures? Is it something that how is that whole how is that insight knowledge, that super knowledge, that's what literally the recollection of past lives under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha designated it as a super mundane knowledge. How is that experience structured? The texts don't say, the commentaries don't say. Adyashanti, for example, he talks about it happening in his awakening. He went to like some other lives. but I was always curious, how is this particular thing occur? Is it mental pictures? And so in my case, it was not mental pictures at all. Consciousness actually recedes into this somehow fundamentally appearing superstructure. And from there, the incarnations, at least in my case, appeared on screens. And when my consciousness or my attention touched one of them, I would appear in that body, in that life, looking through her eyes, feeling her thoughts, everything.
No way. So
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. The first one was just some random woman in what seemed to be the 70s. I don't know for sure. And she was just sitting on her back porch watching the autumn leaves fall. And it was so interesting. Right before that shift happened, I thought there was a thought that went, if I step through this screen, will I disappear from this reality forever? That's how real it was. It was as real as this, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, hey, I gotta see what's on the other side of the screen. So I pop through, I appear in her, and it was like that through the various incarnations. It was very rapid and very fast. But yeah, so some people say that that insight happens in mental pictures, and from my experience of it, it was anything but mental pictures. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. The visions I've had are not like, in my mind's eye. It's like on my retina kind of thing. But no, that's cool. I mean, I guess I'm just curious. And yeah, I feel like a lot of the non-duality teachers, they want to appear more rational and they don't want to sound woo-woo. And so they differentiate themselves that way. But I think I feel like this should also be about being playful and fun and, just enjoying it all. So
oh yeah, I'm a
I appreciate your talking freely about it.
veteran explorer of the land of woo. Like,
I
been a
don't know. I'm an
long
engineer, so I feel like it conflicts with my identity, but also I'm like, finally now I feel free to just be like, I was raised in, a religion that was like, oh, all that's satanic, and then I was an engineer, and so now I'm like, oh, now I can just, explore it at my, just have fun with it,
yeah, it's like going to. I mean, for me, it's like going to Target. Like it's like this room. I
right?
don't see things as I don't see things as any more or less special
Man, you must really love Target.
or any different anymore. Like all of these supposed differentials are gone. But that sure, I'll admit that it wasn't like that in the beginning. I definitely when I had my first out of body experience, I was like, holy shit, I became something. You know what I mean? Definitely ego inflation occurred for sure. So this is
Uh,
but I was like 18 when I had my first one, you know?
and that
So
was
it was
before awakening for
yeah,
you.
way before
Oh,
awakening.
got it.
Yeah. So these things can be distractions. That's why you have to make general blanket rules when your given teaching is reaching thousands of people and just say, hey, avoid that. Just focus on presence. Right.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. You're welcome. Jeffrey.
Yeah. Um, you just mentioned something that was really interesting. You said that there's a thing called destiny. So my question is, can the free will of the mind get in the way of our destiny?
Oh, I think
Or what is
it does. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So what I saw or what appeared was that it's like there's this particular a word I've heard for it is your highest divine life path. It's an example of that word of something that captures like the path in life where uh awakening occurs and your gifts are manifest. It depends on the person actually. But at least in my case, there was like this stream of events that would occur in time, and that there were certain choice points where a given test or a given challenge would occur, and that a specific choice was attempted to be elicited as a result of that challenge, or like a specific learning would occur. But particularly in the Buddhist teachings, they say that, for example, uh, if you do a lot of, if your deeds are excessively good, the configurations of the destiny will change for the better. But if you do excessively bad, like harmful things, the configurations of the destiny can appear worse. It's like going from a good dream to a bad dream. And it's really the notion of free will. So in Buddhism, like free will is just this mental formation called choice. So for my looking into this, it seems that although choice is conditioned, it's not determined. Like thoughts arise spontaneously, but my hand doesn't just move spontaneously without the presence of intention. So movement is dependent on intention, whereas thought is not dependent on intention. So making a specific decision is based on the presence of intention. And the exercising of choice, if it was determined, um, we'd probably feel like robots. So for me, choice is the difference between an automatic physical movement. Let's say I'm going to sleep and you have this knee jerk reaction where your hand flops. That's an automatic, spontaneous event. The choice is the gap between an automatic, spontaneous jerk of your hand and uh, the actual intentional moving of that hand. Automatic knee jerk reaction of the hand, intentional movement. Like this is really where choice is, and I found that that's not it's not determined the same way that an automatic movement of the hand is. There's no choice involved there. There's no intention involved there. And yes, this whole thing with choice and what we call free will, um, definitely can affect the outcome of a destiny, or it can affect how that's configured. I don't know. Actually, since I've only seen my own destiny, I don't. It's difficult to say for other people, right? But the destiny of this particular body, or this particular like consciousness unit body. But for others, based on what I've heard, it seems that it's like there's this original plan, which is the destiny, the things that the um, entity decides upon doing before the incarnation. But because there's an entry into time space and there's a forgetting of that destiny and of all of those intentions, um, it's really it's a gamble. It's like if you're set up to do these four major things in life, or you wanted to do these four major things in an incarnation, uh, you might not get to all of them, depending on the conditions. It's like a gamble. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It definitely made sense. And it was just like, yeah, that one part of it for me was like, if there's something really meant for me,
Yeah.
I think it'll just eventually like if I'm not on that path, then my subconscious will wreck my entire life until I get into that path, basically.
Ramana Maharshi actually had a very he had a completely deterministic view on life. So from Ramana's standpoint, God does everything. So there's no point in attempting to do anything other than what your duty is. So it's very much like Bhagavad Gita Hindu, your role in life sort of view. Um, that being the case, Ramana also said, if it's not in your destiny to become famous, don't even try. like, like, like if something that you're attempting to do or want to do is not in the cards for you, like there's no chance. Because he had a deterministic worldview based on the Vedanta teachings. Uh, Buddhism really does see it differently because there's no God in Buddhism. There's dependent origination, right? There's these nexus of conditions that roll on and on and on. Um, there's no there's no deterministic view that is in the Vedanta teachings. It doesn't mean that there's a self that is changing things, right? Like that's not what's being posited in Buddhism. But what's being posited is that choice itself as a mental formation exists, and that is the reason that there's like variation, chance. And from my understanding, determinism is not. I don't see how that's provable. Like I think if we had a completely deterministic universe, we'd probably be able to like predict events before they happen, but we don't seem to be able to do that at all. So that it's ultimately like a big I don't know. Like how would we really know that everything is predetermined? Everything. You know, even my you know direct sight into destiny, that was just something that happened at that time. I don't know if I looked at the destiny in a year from now, would it appear the same way? I haven't gone back and checked. So these things are malleable. Yeah, and that is the case that Buddhism is making actually. That the destiny, karma, fate, these are not these they're laws, but their outcomes are not uh, entirely determined. They can be changed. Yeah, there's a good book on that. Leo Fan's Four Lessons from Mahayana Buddhism. I shared that story once in here, so I won't do it again. But it's really good. Uh, Basically, if you do a lot of good stuff, the configurations change. If you do a lot of bad stuff, even if you had a good destiny laid out for you, you shoot it down the drain. Yeah. Even if you were supposed to help a lot of people and do a lot of good for the world and awaken, if the weight of the negative karma was so heavy from things that you did, then that destiny may not be able to come to fruition. I mean, like really heavy stuff, you know, like I don't want to say because I don't want the YouTube to ban it, you know, but you know, ceasing lives of other beings. Yes, I hope that passed the YouTube judge. All right, let's do one more and then we can sit. Oh my God, I just remembered the subject of this class, which was commitment to presence. Never mind, no questions. Let's get to the subject and then we'll meditate. Um, by the way, for everyone that's new here, we do these very long sits until 3 hours from now. It's not mandatory to stay for the whole thing. You can leave whenever you like. But the idea is that once a week, you have a time where you give yourself this 3 hour block where you're not doing anything else but noticing. You're not doing anything else but your practice. You know, don't, if you are going to stay for the whole 3 hours, even if you're not meditating, I highly recommend that during this time, you don't use your phone or like do things that you know will really capture your attention as much as possible during this time. Just be in the continuity of noticing as much as possible. Be in the continuity of being aware. That's really um, what this is for. The issue is that we'll meditate for 30 minutes here, we'll meditate for 30 minutes there, meditate another 30 minutes. So within a given week, we meditated 3 times, but it's only 30 minutes each time. And then we wonder why our mind is still all over the place. And it seems that, there's no real uh, deepening or awakening that is happening. Awakening is already the case. Experience is already uninterrupted. Consciousness is already this. But because our attention is elsewhere, we don't notice that. Our mind's always doing so many things. So really, the point of practice is to just be in the continuity of recognition. 3 hours is a lot of recognition time. So some of you will find that it's quite useful. You can do what you like. If you want to sit and then walk back and forth every 40 minutes, you get up out of the chair and you sit. Do it. If you sit for 30 or 40 and then you want to write a little bit and then walk, whatever. It's up to you. It's really how you want to do it. For me, I will just more or less sit here until it's over. So for the subject of the talk today, commitment to presence. That really just means commitment to noticing, commitment to reality, commitment to awareness. We find that there's this balance between not trying at all and trying way too hard and using force in our practice. So the question we have is, how does this continuity of presence, how does this continuity of awareness actually become possible? How does it stabilize? And the experience itself is continuous. Like happening is always happening. So really all you're doing is noticing that again and again and again. Your mind wanders, you notice it again. You notice awakeness again. Many of you're doing one of the 3 modes. If you're new, I'll have to send you that video. It explains my approach to this whole thing. But the idea is you don't need to use force, but you do need to be committed. You don't need to don't be tense, but commitment does have to be there. It's like with anything else. If you want that particular seed to grow, there needs to be commitment to watering it. Experience doesn't have to be watered. Experience doesn't have to be cultivated, but the noticing does. The noticing does. Reality doesn't have to be cultivated, mature, taken care of. Reality takes care of itself. But the noticing of that can either be very high or it can be very minor. So what's an example of high degree of noticing, high degree of awareness? So imagine I'm like a programmer. I just go into your brain or your whole matrix and I just delete mind wandering, attention lapsing, and internal dialogue out of your consciousness. Poof, gone. If you don't have a reason to use thought, it doesn't arise. If that was to happen to you, you'd probably call me tomorrow and you'd say, oh my God, liberation. So it's really just those 3 things. When you have the mind wandering, the attention lapsing, and you have a lot of internal dialogue, the mind really, or your attention really jumps from one thing to another. It's not that experience is jumping from one thing to another. Reality is not jumping from one thing to another, but your noticing is, your awareness is. That's what aware, unaware, aware, unaware, aware, unaware, aware, unaware. If you were just boom 100% aware all the time, it would be the most noticeable thing ever in your life. Ever. You're like, wow, this is what it means to be awake. So you get these periods in meditation where that awareness is continuous, noticing is continuous naturally for longer periods of time. So when you do a 3 hour sit, usually the first hour, you're all over the place. And then going into the second and third, things calm down. So one of the questions is, how does the continuity of awareness reach the level of not deviating, not lapsing? That's like the Buddha level. So it's something that can be aspired to, but really that is uh, that is very high. So, but in our case, what supports the continuity of noticing, what supports the continuity of presence, are the enlightenment factors. So, enlightenment factors are uh, they're these states that arise in the mind, or these aspects of experience that arise as a result of meditation, as a result of doing practice. So the mindfulness enlightenment factor is one, rapture is another, tranquility enlightenment factor is another, equanimity enlightenment factor is another, investigation of states is another. So these are all factors that arise in the mind that really support the continuity of presence, and they support the mind being released from clinging, from craving, from trying, from holding on. When your tranquility factor is very high, that means the amount of calm you experience in the mind and body, when that is very high, there's the sense that even if thoughts are arising, it's like way in the background. This tranquility, this deep, it's actually like a physical tranquilization. Your body becomes so still. The virtue of that, by the virtue of that stillness, by the virtue of that tranquility, the attention lapsing, the mind wandering is significantly reduced. Another example, equanimity factor. When the equanimity factor is really high, or it doesn't even have to be really high, it can just be moderately high. It means that your mind has this like perfect balance. Like, doesn't matter what happens, you're not concerned. Doesn't matter if the mind wanders, or if it doesn't, or if attention lapses. It's all good. It's like the perfection of it's all good. That's equanimity. The pain doesn't bother you because the balance is so deep. So if you have a lot of equanimity, and your mind is like this, it's like this lake without any waves, the amount of mental dialogue, mind wandering, attention lapsing, down, 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 down. Same thing with the rapture and the mindfulness enlightenment factors. So if within this sit, or within any sit that you're doing, if you notice that for some reason, you don't know why or where it came from, for some reason, bang, like your mindfulness, the continuity of awareness goes from 2 to 10, and you're just continuously aware on its own, that's the birth of the mindfulness enlightenment factor. That's the presence of that. It's like this momentum that powers your continuity of noticing. Rapture, which is happiness. If the meditation, if what's happening feels so good, there's there's less of a tendency for your mind to want to do anything else. And if your mind doesn't want to do anything else, it's completely content with the present moment, completely contented with that happiness. Boom, you have a reduction in attention lapsing and mind wandering, and the continuity is present. So it's really, really this question of how is it possible to become more aware is related to the maturation of the enlightenment factors. If your mind uh, becomes very, very, very quiet and there's just not much thinking happening, you'll find inadvertently you're more aware. When you get busy, you have a lot of stuff going on, deadlines, challenges, you'll find there's less awareness. Why? Because there's more content for the mind to engage with. There's more that the mind that thought has to do in time, and that is filling up the consciousness. So one of the Buddha's recommendations was one of the keys to like deepening meditation is to for example, one of the reasons people go on retreats is like when you're on a retreat, you don't have anything to do and there's no planning that you need to do. When there's no planning that you need to do, the mind doesn't need to reach into the future. So there's conditions like this. You can see the factors of enlightenment as conditions which support the deepening and uh, the deepening of continuity or the extending of continuity of our attention and of our noticing. It is a conditional thing. If you do less, you happen to be able to meditate more, you have a lifestyle that permits that, you'll notice those factors increase, awareness increases. Of course, if you're doing the meditation right, if you're just like forcing your consciousness and like holding on for your dear life, trying to make something happen, like no, that's all wrong. That's not gonna work. But I mean, like really let go, just noticing experience, getting out of the way. That will work. All right. So we're going to begin now. I'm going to stop the recording here.